This is chapter 20 of the Tanya, and we've taken a couple weeks off. I hope everyone had a nice Pesach and a beautiful holiday. But so we'll go back a few steps and remember what the Tanya is talking about. The premise of the entire book of this section of Tanya, the Tanya is sort of an adopted name. Tanya is not actually the name of the book itself. Tanya is the first word of the book, and so we sort of go, that's what it's known colloquially as, whereas the official name, the name on its birth certificate, is Sefer Shel Beinonim, L'Kutei Amarim, a collection of talks, Sefer Shel Beinonim, the book for the average person, for the intermediate, for the, there's the tzaddik, the righteous person, there's the Rasha, the wicked person, and the Beinoni somewhere in the middle. So for the first 10 or so chapters, the Alter Rebbe establishes that what does a Beinoni mean? And when we say Beinoni, a Beinoni is not some far-off mission. The Beinoni, the intermediate, is what we are supposed to aim for. But what does that mean? It doesn't mean be sort of okay, be average. A Beinoni means someone who has never actually committed a sin, at least mentally, or we'll focus on this moment right now, who would never actually sin. They never do anything against God. Why do we have to say that? Because the moment we go against God, in that moment, we are called a Rasha. And that I'm specifically not using the translated words, wicked, righteous, because those are, we get the wrong feeling. We do one infraction and suddenly we're wicked. We don't want to label ourselves and we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves in that way. So I'm using the Hebrew words. The word Rasha, and we just had it at the Seder table, one of the four sons, is the Rasha. He's at the Seder, he's participating, and yet we call him the Rasha. Why? Because he's distancing himself from God. Whenever we do even the slightest infraction, in that moment at least, we're called a Rasha. So it must be that the intermediate, the Beinoni, isn't so average after all. It means that they never actually sin. So then what's the difference between the tzaddik, the righteous person, and the Beinoni, the intermediate? The difference is, are they tempted to sin? The Rasha, the tzaddik, is someone who has completely destroyed their temptation to sin. They don't have it anymore. They're off on their own journey. If Len was here, he would ask me about free will, because it's a good question. And I don't know the answer because I am not a tzaddik. I have a big admission today. I'm not a tzaddik. A tzaddik is someone who has defeated their evil desires, defeated their evil inclination, and they are the winner of the battle.
So they have risen to that point.
Yes, absolutely. They have risen to that point. In other places in Hasidic philosophy, it explains that from birth, they were always on that mission. That was their goal. They had to get there. They had to earn it. It's not necessarily a given, but that's their path. What's left for all of us is to strive to be a Beinoni. To strive that even though moment to moment we have temptations, moment to moment we want to sin, right? We want to rob the bank. We want to eat that cake, whatever it is that's tempting us today. We want to sin, but we say no. We don't think about it. We don't talk about it. Right? We don't think sinful thoughts. We don't speak sinful talk. And we definitely don't do sinful deeds. And that is what we are all supposed to do. Now, what gets us a little bit more exciting is that there's a verse. Actually, the foundational verse that the entire Tanya is based on is a book from Deuteronomy, from the book of Devarim, where Moses tells the Jewish people this thing, to serve God, to do the mitzvos, to not do sins, it is very close to you to do, speak, and think. It's very close to you in your mind, in your speech. And the question is, it's not. I've been on this world for X amount of years, and it's not easy at all. How could Moshe tell me the Torah is eternal, the Torah is a message to me personally? As a Jewish person, the Torah is talking to me, and the Torah tells me that this thing is very easy. That's not true. It's against my experiences. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe, in the chapters, 12 through 17, explains a very doable course of action. All you have to do is meditate. Right? Is it easy? What's our goal? is to be able to withstand the temptations. How can I do it? I'm a human. When I'm tempted with something, I slip up. And the answer is, when you love someone or you fear someone, you'll do what they want you to do. And we're not talking about fear that I'm afraid of them. That also does work. If you need to, I could paint you a pretty bleak picture of hell and you'll be too scared to sin. But that's not what we're talking about. When you're in awe of someone, now, the problem is, we don't feel that love, that awe. We don't feel that. Those are not emotions that come naturally to us because, again, we're humans living in 2026 and we don't necessarily have those emotional, that visceral love of God. What can we do? With enough meditation and enough training, we can train ourselves to have an intellectual love. For example, for those that are in the job market, for those that have a job, or at one point had a job, let's think about your relationship with your boss. Do you follow everything your boss wants you to do? Probably. Is it coming from a place of love out of your boss? No. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not necessarily. Maybe some people work for a nonprofit, they work for a great boss, and every day they're motivated by the love of the job itself. But for most people, that's not how it works. So how do you motivate yourself to work every day, to come in and do your hours? Is you think of it for a second. If I don't come in for this job, I'm not going to get paid.
Right, you need the job.
I need a job. And so by thinking about what's going to happen if I disobey my boss, he's going to fire me. That is a motivation. That's what we're calling an intellectual emotion. Do you actually have a love and fear for your boss? Some guy that you could probably, ignore and with no consequences, what is he going to do? Fight you? But intellectually, you understand why you need to have this job, you need to listen, and that's enough of a motivator. Theoretically, we can all do that with God. We can conjure up this love and fear through an intellectual process. I think about God, I focus on how great God is, and God loves me, and God who creates me, and with enough meditation and enough thought, I can create what we call an intellectual emotion. The problem is, while that's definitely doable, that's not easy. You have to have knowledge, you have to have a brain, you have to have the ability to sit and think about things, and the idea of meditating. And we're not here talking about sitting, cross-legged in a circle, thinking about nothing. We're talking about focusing on God's greatness, on God's connection with the world. It's not easy. Is it doable? 100%. But is it easy? Is it close to me? No. So the Alter Rebbe at the beginning of chapter 18 asked a question. He said that whole idea of motivating ourselves by intellectually creating a love and fear, that's not easy. It's doable, but it's as doable as me running a marathon. I can do it, but it's not going to be easy. I have to train, I have to learn, tomorrow morning I can't wake up and run a marathon. The same way, let's say none of us can wake up tomorrow morning and start having this intellectual love and fear of God. All of that was a summary. If that was too far back for you to remember, if that was too confusing, don't worry about it. Because from chapter 18, the Alter Rebbe started a new conversation. And that is, what is the type of love for God, love of God, and love to God, that's easy for us to do, karev elecha, close to us? And the answer is that all of us, as Jewish people, in our factory settings, buried deep within us, we have a very strong connection and love for God. Why? Where does it come from? What is it doing in me? What is it? So, cutting out a lot of Kabbalistical talk that the Alter Rebbe focused on, essentially it boils down to one idea. I have a soul, and my godly soul wants to connect to God. The same way a candle wants to flutter back up into the sun, go flutter back into the source of all light, my soul wants to return to God. The Alter Rebbe discussed at length. Where it comes from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. It's our inheritance. And what's the thing about an inheritance? You don't have to earn it. You don't have to work on it. All you have to do is be born into the right family, and you get the inheritance. That's how inheritance works. In Jewish law, an inheritance, the word Yerusha, talks about something very, very specific, and that is the default transfer from one generation to the next. As soon as someone starts messing in their will, which by all means you're entitled to do, but that goes out of the laws of inheritance and goes into the laws of gift giving. Gift. You're gifting. I mean, we're not talking about a law of inheritance right now, but generally speaking, that's an important difference. Because Yerusha, right, if a father loves one son more than the other, and decides to give one son 75% of the estate and the other son 25%, does he have a right to do that? Absolutely. But then that's a gift, that's not an inheritance. All of us, no matter what we've done, no matter what we haven't done, no matter if we were aware that we're Jewish or not, every Jewish person has an inheritance from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. What is that inheritance? Our neshama, our soul. And built in the factory setting, is buried deep, deep, deep within our soul, is an unquenchable love of God. That was what the Alter Rebbe discussed in chapters 18 and starting into 19. Now, when does this love come out? When does this love do anything? The fact that I've buried deep, deep within me, I have a love of God, doesn't help me if it never helps me. When does that love come to the forefront? Whenever there's a moment when a Jewish person is challenged on their faith, and in, an unmitigated challenge, serve an idol or I kill you. History has shown us, unfortunately, time and time again, that a Jewish person will say, kill me. Doesn't matter their education level, doesn't matter their level of relationship with God, doesn't matter anything, doesn't matter. But a Jewish person, by default, will say, I cannot be separated from God. That doesn't mean we don't have free choice, and definitely there have been times when people said, I'll take the easy way out. I'll take the other way out. I shouldn't say easy, God forbid. I'll take the other way out. That does happen, but that's for one of two reasons. Either they're just so, their free choice is acting, right? Because at the end of the day, we still have some version of free choice. But also, another possibility is if we're able to convince ourselves that this is not really an attack on my relationship with God. Now, you might think, if a Jew is given the choice, serve an idol or else. Clearly, serving the idol would be giving up my relationship with God, which we just said a Jewish person cannot do. It's buried deep within our factory settings that we cannot give up our relationship with God. But our ability to fool ourselves into thinking that this doesn't really affect my relationship with God is the one Achilles heel of this relationship. So, when faced with a choice of serve God or not, have a relationship with God or not, when it really shakes us to our core, when it really, in case of emergency break glass, in case of the emergency of serve an idol, our internal love of God wakes up, jolts awake, and stops us from, God forbid, severing our relationship with God. That was chapter 19. The problem is, and this is what chapter 20 is going to start dealing with, how do I implement that on my day-to-day life? How do I implement that on my day-to-day life? Every day, I am not being faced with the temptation to serve an idol. I am not being faced with the temptation to reject God in that way. I'm being faced with a much smaller temptation. Do I have to really give up my life? Am I really jolted awake? Is my hidden love, which is there but very hidden, it's not woken up by every small-time sin or every small-time opportunity. And so while the Alter Rebbe introduced us to this new internal built-in love that we all have, and it's there. It's not hard to tap into, seemingly, right? It's how do I make that real when I'm not being, if the problem with an emergency protocol. This is an emergency protocol. In case of severance from God, break glass, and this internal love will fire up and help us and motivate us and stop us from, God forbid, committing such a sin. But in my day-to-day life, I'm not faced with such choices. They say the story of a young yeshiva student, or not yeshiva, a child who was away from home and wandering around the neighborhood on Shabbat, and going on a walk, and a police cruiser stopped by and said, "Young man, can I help you?" 10-year-old kid, and said, "No, don't worry, I'm just trying to find my way home." He says, "Well, if you hop in, I'm happy to drive you home." And the kid goes nuts. He says, no way, even if you try to kill me or try to, I'm not going to give up Shabbos. The cop said, okay, I'm sorry. Right? Because in the kid's mind, oh my goodness, a policeman is trying to get me to desecrate Shabbos. This is all the legends and stories that I've heard about.
He's being well taught.
Exactly. But that's not our day-to-day life. Our temptations are not serve God or else. They're much more benign, much more convenience or temptation. It feels good. What? Right? And that is where the Alter Rebbe, starting in chapter 20, is going to teach us, really chapter 20 through 24, for how do we train ourselves that this is our reality. That any time, even the smallest sin, will wake up our internal love. Yeah?
I think it's easy.
You think it's easy? I mean, I having learned these, I agree with you. Having already learned these chapters, I mean, it's not my first time learning Tanya, I agree with you. Because you're very right. The logic, once you know the logic, once you know the trick, it's super simple. And as this verse tells us, this is very easy to do. And it's based on one simple premise. And this is the one point for chapter 20. If you want to know. If everything else is too much, one thing that we're learning in chapter 20 is the idea of the unity of God. God is not just one, right? Obviously, we say in our prayer, Shema Yisrael. Right? What's the prayer, Shema Yisrael? The motto of Judaism?
The Lord is one.
Hear, O Israel. Listen up, guys. The Lord is our God. Hashem Echad. Now, on a very basic level, that's the idea of monotheism. There's only one God, there's not 42 gods. There's only one God, there aren't 3 gods, etc. But Chassidus takes us to a much deeper level, explaining not only is there only one God, but everything is within that one God. There is only one God, period. Not only one God and then there's the whole world and everything else that exists. In existence, there is only one God. Now, this chair is God. I'm God. A sinner is God. How does that make any sense? What do we mean when we say that everything is God? And that is where the Alter Rebbe is going to start talking in chapter 20 about this idea. In Hebrew, it's called Achdus Hashem. Everything is God. And this is, I would say, one of the most fundamental ideas in Hasidic philosophy, that a lot of things revolve around this core truth. Everything is God. We live in this world, and we see billions of things that don't look like God, and don't feel like God, and don't talk like God, and seem to be a blockage of God. That is true. And we're going to continue to discuss that over the next few chapters. How do we explain this idea? I mean, this is a very fundamental idea that's discussed here. There's an entire section of Tanya. This is chapter 20 out of 53 in section 1 of Tanya. After this section, section 2 is a 12-chapter section that talks exclusively about this idea that everything is God. We're going to explore it briefly over the next few chapters with the understanding the fundamentalness of this idea that everything is God. And once we understand that everything is God, where the Alter Rebbe is going with this is if everything is God, then even the slightest infraction, right? Even robbing a bank, we'll go back to that example, is a binary choice of God or not. And as we just explained, a binary choice, God or not, I have no problem with standing. We just have to train ourselves that every choice becomes a choice of God or not. And so we'll start on page 2, after that introduction. And the Alter Rebbe starts off with the we'll start and then we'll explain. This is on page 2. V'hinei midah zeis lakol ki mitzvah v'azharas avodah zara shehem shnei diborim harishenim anochi v'layiyelecha hem klolus kol haTorah kula. It is well known that the positive commandment to believe in God's unity and the admonition concerning idolatry, which form the first 2 commandments in the Decalogue, I am God, and you shall have no other gods, comprise the entire Torah. In exactly 5 weeks, we're going to be celebrating Shavuos, the giving of the Torah. The holiday of Shavuos It's exactly 7 weeks after Passover, so 5 weeks from tonight, I believe. We're going to be celebrating that holiday. What is Shavuos? We're commemorating, we were at Mount Sinai, and God gave us a Torah. What did God give us? He didn't hand us a Torah scroll like we have in the Ark. God gave us the 10 Commandments. What are the 10 Commandments? There's the first one, I am the Lord. It's more of a statement, not more than a commandment. It is a statement, I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God. Just me. I'm the only one up here. The second one is, therefore, you shall have no other gods before me. Those are the two first commandments. I am God, and the prohibition against idolatry. Those two commandments, though we think that they're 2 out of 613, the truth is they are the general rule that comprises every single mitzvah. How does that make sense? The mitzvah of not eating, non-kosher, what does that have to do with God? I am the Lord your God. The mitzvah to not wear shatnez, not wear a mixture of wool and linen, what does it have to do with idol worship? And the answer is, we'll see over the next few chapters, how every single mitzvah, every single commandment, positive and negative, is included in those two commandments. Every time we put on tefillin or light Shabbos candles, that is part of the mitzvah of I am the Lord your God. Every time we refrain from doing something we're not supposed to do, we are fulfilling the mitzvah of thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Why? Continuing on page 2. Ki dibur anochi koilel kol ramach mitzvahs aseh v'layiyelecha koilel kol shasam mitzvahs aseh. For the commandment I am God contains all of the 248 positive precepts, while the commandment you shall have no other gods contains all the 365 prohibitive commandments. V'lachein Shemanu anechi v'layiyelecha levad mipi agvura k'maimri azal v'nei shem klul eskol. That is why we heard only these two commandments, I am and you shall not have, directly from God, while the other 8 commandments were transmitted by Moshe, as our sages have said, for they are the sum total of the entire Torah. There's a bit of history, which you may be familiar with, which is the Jewish people were standing at the foot of Mount Sinai, and God wanted to himself tell us the 10 commandments. God wanted, there was a booming voice representing God that we were supposed to hear the 10 commandments from. The problem was, it was so enrapturing, if that's a word, that hearing the commandments directly from God was so enthralling that our souls couldn't contain it, and the entire Jewish people dropped dead.
Dropped what?
Dropped dead. Their souls left their body. It was such a holy experience. It was so completely, our souls we expired. That was after one commandment. So God revived the dead, as he does. The Jewish people were back alive. And God said the second commandment, thou shalt not have any idol gods before me. What happened? Again, poof. Everyone, after God revived us for the second time, they told Moshe, that's too much. It was fun. It was an incredible experience from God, but it's too much for us. You go, God will tell you the 8, and you come and tell it to us. Which means that ultimately, which commandments did we hear directly from God? Just those first 2. But that's okay.
That's a great thought.
You like that?
I do like that.
Yeah. It's interesting. The morning prayer. My God, the soul which you have given within me is pure. You have created it, you have formed it, you have breathed it into me, and you preserve it within me. Yeah. You will eventually take it from me.
Yes.
And restore it within me in the time to come.
Yes.
So long as the soul is within me, I offer thanks to you, Lord my God, and God of my fathers, Master of all works, Lord of all souls. Blessed are you, Lord, who restores souls to dead bodies.
Yep.
God.
That's
good.
It's a beautiful...
It means even more now that with what you just explained. I say that every morning.
Yeah. Every morning, just for some context, every morning in the morning blessings, which is a very powerful way to start our day, there is a paragraph where we thank God, because essentially when we wake up, it's a miniature version of reviving the dead. We're asleep.
Yeah.
We're as the expression goes, we're dead to the world. Yeah. We're asleep. God revives us and sends our soul back down. And so we incorporate in that prayer references that the day will come when our souls will will fully leave our body. After, God willing, 120 years of very full productive life, our life ends. But that's not the end of the story, because God eventually will return our soul to us when Mashiach comes. But that has already happened. At Mount Sinai, it happened twice. But what did the Jewish people tell Moshe? 2 was enough. We can't do any more. And so the last 8, we heard from Moshe, retelling the commandments from God. But what does that mean? It's okay. Even though we only heard those two are still the foundation and encompass all the other commandments. Included in the phrase, I am the Lord your God, is the fulfillment of every single mitzvah. Included in the phrase, do not have any gods before me, is included the idea of every prohibition. How? Continuing on page 3. The Alter Rebbe is going to start explaining how. Ulevayer hativ inyan zeh. So sometimes we look at those first 2 commandments. I am the Lord your God. Therefore, listen to everything else that I have to tell you. Right? There's the idea of the sovereign citizen. Right? The idea that there are some people that say, I don't accept the rulership of the government around me. I have the constitutional right to do whatever I want. It's a whole fascinating legal subculture. To avoid that, God, the first 2 commandments are a premise. I am the Lord your God, and therefore you have to listen to everything that I say. Almost like a technical thing. Why do I have to put on tefillin every day? Because there's only one God and he told me to. However, we're going to explain now a deeper level. Not only that this is a foundation for why should I listen to God, because, I'll again use that example of why should I put on tefillin or light Shabbos candles, because God is God and he told me to. Because then, if I don't put on tefillin, am I rejecting God's oneness? No. The same way that if I speed, or if I drive dangerously, I'm not rejecting the sovereignty of the United States government over me. I'm just choosing to ignore it.
Being unsociable.
Right. There's a very important distinction here of if I'm doing the commandments because God told me to, well then I know about God, I believe in God, and I'm choosing to ignore him. As is my right, as a human with free choice. But if we understand that every commandment is an expression of God's oneness, of God's existence, of God being the one true God, then any infraction, any time I do a sin or I don't do a mitzvah, what am I doing? I am rejecting God's existence. And with this framing, in those couple of words, we just explained how we can shift our perspective. And suddenly my choice to not do a mitzvah, to skip over a mitzvah, or my choice, God forbid, to commit a sin, is not some minor infraction that doesn't really affect my relationship with God. It does affect my relationship with God because every mitzvah is an expression of God's oneness. And the fact that I shouldn't have any idols. In our class starting on Tuesday night, this is the basis for monotheism. This is the basis and a much deeper level of understanding that every single part, every single thing that I do, right, is an expression of my belief in God. It's not that I believe in God and therefore I'll listen to God. Listening to God is my believing in God.
Will you say that again?
It's not that listening to God is a outcome of my belief in God. It's that listening to God is my believing in God. When I do a mitzvah, I'm not just following instructions, right? Let's again use that example of living in this world. There are laws, and sometimes we do them. Sometimes the lesser ones that don't know, we don't do them necessarily. We use an example of driving. There is a law: you cannot go more than 65 miles an hour on the highway. If I drive 70 miles an hour, am I rejecting the legality of the speed limit? Am I saying that the government has no right to do that? Of course not. The government has a right to do that, and I'm choosing to ignore it. I still accept, right? If I get pulled over and a cop gives me a ticket for it, that's the consequence for not listening to the instructions.
You gave way to temptation.
Right? Absolutely. And you're not supposed, don't do it, and it's not safe, and this is not an endorsement for speeding. But we're trying to explain that going against a law is not rejecting the sovereignty of the United States government, or
That
the state
means
government.
ignoring a mitzvah.
That would mean
That you're not denying
Exactly.
the oneness of God in your soul.
Right.
But you're just not doing it.
Exactly. And that is what you just said is exactly what we're saying here, but that's not factually correct.
Okay.
Factually speaking, it would be as if when I do an avera, if God forbid I sin, that would be like me rejecting the sovereignty of the state government to make that speed limit. That's a very big difference. Because suddenly, every time I speed, what am I doing? I'm not just, making one mistake. I'm rejecting the entire sovereignty of the government around me. Lahavdil, to separate with my relationship with God. It's not, as Joy was saying correctly, that doing a sin is not rejecting God. It's just, making a mistake, making one small error. Every mitzvah or every avera is rejecting the sovereignty of God. By doing one small, it might seem very minor, it might seem like almost nothing. But doing that one small sin, giving temptation and robbing that bank, or having a piece of non-kosher food, or whatever it might be in our own lives, that sin is rejecting the sovereignty of God over me, which is fascinating. How can you say that? How can you say that, having one bite of non-kosher food, or skipping one day of doing a mitzvah that I should be doing, is rejecting God's sovereignty? To explain that, we have the next two chapters reframing the entire world based on the idea of the oneness of God. That not only is there one God, but everything is God. And then we'll explore this idea slowly. We'll start off this idea again on the bottom of page 3. Ulevayir hetiv inyan zeh tzarich lahaskir tchila b'ksara inyan mahus v'achdusei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu shenikra yachid u'miyachad. In order to elucidate this matter clearly, we must first briefly speak of the idea and essence of the unity of God, who is called one and unique. God is not only one, he is also unique, means one of a kind, right? When we mean by that, when we're talking about God, it's not that he's unique and a collector's item. We mean that he is the only thing in existence. There's only one God, not there's one God and 8 billion people, but there is one God that includes everything else. And in order to explain this, because that's nice to say, but I look around and I see right here about a couple thousand things in this room that are not God. I see tables and chairs and people and wood and plants and leaves and everything in this room. How are all of those included in God? And the answer is, continuing on page 4, that before and after creation, nothing changed in regards to God. We say in the high holiday prayers, on page 4 again, V'chol ma'aminim shahu levadeihu, kameshu kedem nivra ha'elam mamish shahayahu levadei. All believe that he is one alone. That's a statement from the high holiday prayers. Now after creation, exactly as he was before the world was created, when he was obviously alone. Since nothing else has yet come into being, so too now after creation, nothing exists apart from him. As we say in the prayer book, you are he who was before the world was created, and you are he who is since the world was created. The world had a start date. God does not. God is beyond time. So before the world was created, there was God. After the world is created, the exact same God with no differences. Us living within the world might say, what do you mean no differences? There's the whole world now. It used to just be God, now there's God plus world. The answer is, it doesn't make a difference. From God's perspective, everything is exactly the same, and we'll discuss how does that work. Perush, hu mamish belishum shinai This emphasis provided by the repeated phrase, you are he who, means you are exactly the same he before and after creation without any change. As it is written, I, the Lord, have not changed since creation. God is still one alone, despite the presence of myriad beings, as the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain. So, how can we say that God is alone if there's a whole world here? And so, let's talk about the world from God's perspective. How did God create the world? We know how long it took him. It took him 6 days. How did God create the world? God spoke, and the world was created. We say every day in prayer, Baruch Sha'amar v'haya ha'olam. Blessed is he who spoke, and the world came into being. Everything here is a result of God speaking the world into existence. When we all came here this morning, we all said good morning to each other. Let's think about those words, good morning, relative to ourselves as a person. Speech, theoretically speaking, you could speak all day, endlessly. There's no limit to how much you can speak. Your mouth might get tired, but that's not, that's your body failing. That's not your power of speech. Your power of speech is completely unlimited, which means, is there any value to one specific word? There's tremendous power in every word. Every one word can destroy someone's life or build someone's life. But is there any value to you, relative to you as a person? Is there any value to one specific word? It's nothing. It's one of trillions of words I'll say over my life. Well, trillions is a bit much, right? Today alone, I'm speaking now for an hour. I'm going to go have a class this afternoon for 2 hours. I'm going to do a lot of talking today. One specific word is nothing relative to my power of speech. And yet, how did God create the world? Through his power of speech.
And then, let there be.
Let there be. God said, let there be light. Our entire concept of light, that, our whole world revolves around light and dark, for God, that was as castaway as us saying good morning to someone we don't know. Absolutely valueless relative to the person himself. And the Alter Rebbe is going to follow that, tracing it up, speech relative to our power of speech is nothing. Speech relative to our power of thought is nothing. Speech relative to our intellect or emotion is absolutely nothing. Let's continue inside. Key. Why from God's perspective has nothing changed before and after creation? The same way your life doesn't change before and after you said the words good morning. Key. For this world, and likewise all the supernal worlds, do not affect any change in his unity by their having been created out of a state of nothingness. Just as God was one alone, single and unique before they were created, so too he is one alone, single and unique after he created them. God created a whole world, 8 billion people, planets, endless stars, so many things God created. How can you say that nothing changed? On page 5, and yet it is so because all is not. Besides him, as it is absolutely non-existent. If you walk into a room and you're alone, you're the only person in that room, and then an ant walks in, some corner behind a bookshelf somewhere, an ant enters that room. Are you still alone in that room? Technically speaking, whatever. From your perspective, are you still alone in that room?
Probably.
Yes. Right? Because the ant is so nothing compared to you. Let's take that a step further. If you're in a room, you're alone, and you say the words hello.
Hello.
Hello. So now there's you and the speech, the word that you just said. Is that a thing? Are you still alone in that room?
Yeah.
Of course. Right? That word is not actually anything. That is exactly how God perceives the world after it came into existence. The world is so nothing to God, is so absolutely, not even a rounding error. It's tax season, so a lot of people talk about, rounding errors. And, for God, the difference between before and after the world is created is absolutely nothing. Why? Because the world is so small and nullified. Continue on page 5. For the coming into being of all the upper and lower worlds out of nothingness, and their life and their existence, i.e. the force that sustains them so they not revert to nothingness and naught, as they were before they were created. Because here's, a difference between, which we discussed in other times, so I'm not going to focus too much on this. The creation of the world was not a one-time event. The creation of the world is happening constantly. Those same words that God said 5,786 years ago, God said, let there be light, that is still continuously powering the idea of light. Because the world is so nothing and so ethereal, so abstract, that in order for it to continue to exist...
You have to keep the plug in.
Exactly.
The outlet.
Exactly. It has to constantly be plugged in to the source. The moment you unplug it, right, it's like if you show someone a television screen for the first time. And they're looking at it and they see horses and people and everything, so many things inside the screen. Then you unplug it, and in an instant everything vanishes. Only a very simple person would ask you, where did all the people and horses go? That's not a real question. They never really existed. The only reason why they existed is because it was tapped in and plugged in and powered. That's the same thing with the world. But all of that, when the world was created and the constant recreation of the world, where does it all come from? Continuing on page 6. Eina eladvar Hashem v'ruach pivis barich melubash behem. It is nothing other than the word of God and the breath of His mouth that is closed in these worlds. Our entire existence and universe and everything we see, to God, is just an outcome of His speech. And now the author is going to follow that logic up. When we think about one word that you said, good morning, or hello, or just a random toss-away word, let's compare that to you as a person. L'mashal, k'may b'nefesh ha'adam, shemedaber diber echad, shediber zeh levadei kolei mamish, afilu legabe klolus ha'nefesh medaberes. To illustrate from the soul of a human being, when a man utters a word, this single word is as absolutely nothing, even when compared only to his articulate soul, i.e. the power of speech as a whole. One word that you say is one of millions you'll say over the course of your life. It's nothing. Your life isn't any different before or after you say that word. I mean, again, words have power, but no value. They have power. You could break someone's world. You could build someone's world. You could do tremendous harm and good with a single word, but there's no value there. It's one of a trillion words that you'll say. Again, exaggerating. I hope no one says a trillion words. That's a lot. Shehu b'chinas levush emtzi shela, shehu koyach hadiber shela, which is the soul's middle garment, i.e. the organ of expression, namely his faculty of speech. Sheyachol dabai diburim le'en kates v'tachlis. Since this faculty can produce an infinite number of words, out of the infinite number of words I'll say over the course of my life, one word has no specific value. Kol shekain legabe b'chinas levush hapnimi shela shehu hamachshava. Hamachshava shemenu nimshuchu hadiburim v'chayusam. Surely then, this word has no value when compared to the soul's innermost garment, the garment which is closer to the soul itself, namely the faculty of thought, which is the source of speech and its life force. Before I say something, my brain formulates that word. And if I'm having a conversation with someone, I have a thought. I have, in my head, I have something I want to say, and then it comes from my thought into my speech. That one single word is valueless to my power of speech, as we discussed. How much more so it's powerless compared to my power of thought. I can literally spend the entire day thinking thoughts, right? I can spend the entire day dreaming up scenarios and conversations. One word that I say has absolutely lost and nullified and missing relative to my power of thought. On page 7, it goes without saying that this word is as naught when it compared to the essence and entity as opposed to the garments of the soul. There may be the 10 attributes, Chachma bin Adas, and so on, for the 7 emotional attributes. From which derive the letters of thought that are clothed in one's speech when it is uttered. let's take that word good morning. Why did you say good morning? So behind the speech that I said, there is a thought. The thought to formulate those words to say good morning. What was behind that thought is either an emotion.
Very personal. Could be very many.
Yeah, exactly. It could be, I like the person, so I want to wish them a good morning. It could be that I understand logically that saying good morning to someone is a powerful way to make them have a good day, right? So I had a thought or an emotion. I like this person. I want them to have a good day. Therefore, my brain formed the words good morning, which my mouth then said. Those words, once they're said, are completely nullified within the hundreds of words I'm going to say over the next hour. Completely nullified in the thoughts that I'm going to have. Absolutely nullified in the emotions that I'm going to have. That word, again, it has a lot of power, but it has no value. It's one of a billion. It's one of a trillion. It's so nullified compared to the vastness. I'm guessing that's an alarm. It's not ringing a pair, so we don't have to go. There's a test downstairs for the smoke for the fire alarm.
We don't have to evacuate.
Until the ones up here start blinking. Emotion is beyond specific letters, beyond specific words. There's if you want to have some fun, ask a non-native speaker or a bilingual person, what language do you think in? You speak English. That I can hear. You have a great English. What language do you think in? It might take them a few seconds to think about it. The best way to find out is ask them, count. In your head, count the chairs here. And in their head, if they're by default a Hebrew speaker, even if they can talk English perfectly, in their mind, they speak another language. Right? But then there is a part of our intellect which is above language, above words. It's a thought that we have. We then express that thought with words in our mind and in our right, because this same Tanya that we're learning it here. This is a class in English. In Israel, there's a class in Hebrew, and in Russia, there's a class in Russian. It's the same intellect, but before it's divided up by words and language. And if I were to give this class again in Hebrew, the thought, the intellect is the same, even if the mental words and definitely the physical, the expressive words are going to be very different because it's a whole different language. All of this to say that relative to the rest of us, one word has no value, beyond no value. It's a throwaway. It's so valueless compared to the rest of us, to my power of speech, to my power of thought, or my intellect and emotion. That is exactly how God sees the world. Are you any different before you said a word and after you said a word? You're the exact same person. Nothing has changed relative to you. Why? Because a word is so valueless. If you're walking down the street and you see someone and you say, hey, just one syllable, hey. Are you any different before or after you said that word? You're exactly the same person. Nothing is missing, nothing was added, nothing was changed, nothing at all. It's not even like you gave them, theoretically, if you were to pluck out one of your hairs and give it to them, technically speaking, you're slightly different. You're missing one hair. It might be valueless, but something is different. Speech, before and after you say something, absolutely nothing is different. Because it's so less than who I am.
When do we discuss the reaction of our spoken word?
That's a great question. Because I want to again emphasize, that's not to say that your words don't have power. Because your word has absolute power, right? With that one hey, you could make someone's whole day. Someone greeted me, that's amazing. But power does not equal value. Especially relative to me. Relative to the other person, it has a lot of value because they just got a greeting. But relative to me, before I said that word and after I said that word, did anything change about me? Did I lose anything? Did I gain anything? Did my world? No. Everything is exactly the same.
Until we get to the second person in the room.
Absolutely. Their life may be changed. Right? And David's saying a great point. That we keep on saying how these words have no value. They have tremendous power. With these nothing words, God created our entire universe. Right? So we're not saying that they have no power. We're saying they have no value. They have the power to make someone's day, to break someone's day, to make someone happy or sad, or change someone's life forever. But the actual breath that's coming out of my mouth and the word hey, does that have any value relative to who I am as a person? Before that breath came out and after the breath came out, is there anything different about me? No. And that is exactly how God sees the world. Why? Because from God's perspective, the entire universe is an outcome of his speech. Continuing on page 8. Keep going. L'mashal, sorry. For example, when a man suddenly becomes conscious of a certain love or desire in his heart, before it has written from his heart to the brain to meditate on it and ponder it, it has not yet acquired the element of letters, it is only a pure desire or longing for the object of his affection. All the more so before he began to feel in his heart a craving desire for that thing, when it has yet confined in the realm of his intellect, chachma, understanding, and bina, and corresponding to bina, and knowledge, das. Here's the important part. Meaning that the thing that was known to him to be desirable and gratifying, something good and pleasant to attain and to cling to, as for instance to study or a certain discipline or to eat some delicacy, then in the state of intellectual appreciation of the desired object, before the appreciation has even developed into emotion, there are certain letters in his mind. Let's go from beginning to end of a story of me wanting a piece of cake. Where does it start? Somewhere deep within me, beyond words, beyond intellect, beyond anything. I have a desire for a piece of cake, kosher, delicious, fresh cake. What happens? I have that desire. It's not it's not a thought. It's a desire. It's beyond thought. Then my next thing is that desire manifests as a thought, a coherent thought. I'm going to go get some cake. And then I have to start thinking, well, where can I get cake from? There's no kosher bakeries in town. I have to go think who has some cake in their freezer, and where can I get it from, and what can I do, and how can I ask them? And then I get into I get into that mode of figuring out in my mind how I'm going to do it. And then I realize that Chef Lisa in the freezer has some kosher cake. Let me go ask her. Which causes me to have, now in my mouth, I have a word that, a word ready to go. Can I please have some cake? So we just traced one idea from a desire beyond words, beyond intellect, right? Beyond anything. That same desire can manifest in so many different thoughts and so many different acts. But we just traced how relative to me, not even to me, relative to the desire for cake, that word, can I have some cake, is so low and removed from me and distant from me. I can ask a million people for a piece of cake. Again, when I get the piece of cake, it's because the word has tremendous power, but no value. I'm sorry. Continuing on page 8, we'll finish off the next until the next couple paragraphs, and then we'll summarize what we discussed. Only after the desire and craving has already descended into his heart, i.e., after they have developed into emotions through the stimulus of his wisdom, not understanding, and knowledge. Only after they've descended once again from the heart back to the brain to think and meditate on how to implement a desire by actually obtaining that food or actually studying that subject. On page 9, it is only at this point, when one applies his thought to implementing his desire, that letters are born in one's mind, corresponding to the language of each of the nations who employ these letters when speaking about and thinking about everything in the world. Right? If I was speaking to Chef Lisa, I'd use English words. If I was speaking to someone who only speaks Spanish, I would stumble my way through a Spanish sentence. What's the difference? Because for the same piece of cake, two different people, I might use different words for them. Two different situations, I might use different plans of action. What the Alter Rebbe is doing here is showing us how far removed the actual speech that's coming out of my mouth is from who I am and from what I really want. What's the point of telling us that? Because when we remember that God created the entire world and creates the entire world just through the power of his speech, it helps remind us, and this is again, we're sort of stopping mid-sentence here because this is one thought that spreads over a few chapters, but this is the idea of the oneness of God. Not that there is one God, but that everything is God. How is everything God? Because everything is so nullified and so nothing compared to God that we're all included by default into God, as we'll continue to discuss. But for now, Joy, for the one idea that we want to come away from this class with, the idea that everything is God. Everything that we see, good, bad, holy, not holy, world, physical, spiritual, no matter what we see, it's really all part of God. We're going to explain exactly how that works. And how, I see things that, right now we're talking about neutral things that are different. The world in general. What about evil things? What about bad things? That's part of God. But as we'll continue to explain, how everything is an expression, is a manifestation of God in some way. That's chapter 20. And God willing, we will continue this thought about how everything is God next week.
So, you taught me a long time ago that Jews get this wonderful soul.
Mm-hmm.
And today, throughout this entire time, you're talking about the individual decisions that people are making relative to mitzvahs, relative to their speech, relative to all these things. So, we're all very different. How much did God make us different in the beginning? And how much are we responsible to live within whatever the core is that he gave us?
That's a great question.
I'm very confused.
Yes, because and the Alter Rebbe, I believe it was before you joined us as we were studying, because it was much, much earlier in the Tanya. The Alter Rebbe addressed that question directly. Because you're right, studying these ideas of souls, to say we all have a soul is confusing when we see the four different people sitting around this room and how different we all become in our different thought. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe divides it between the soul itself, that internal core of the soul, versus everything else about us, our emotions, our intellect. Right? Let's use a very simple example. We're all human. We all have that humanity. We all have different IQs. We don't have different, some people are more hot-blooded, some people are more cold-blooded, some people are more, we're all different. And the Alter Rebbe discusses Kabbalistically where that all comes from, which is not important for our conversation right now. But the Alter Rebbe definitely divides who we are at our core, our soul itself, and then everything about our soul. Is your soul more powerful? Is it more weak?
He's still involved.
Who's he?
God.
Yes, absolutely. That's all God's part of the God's decision. We started off before the class. I mentioned to you
this little thing.
Yes, God. The way we described it was, imagine you have a little ball,
Yeah.
and you're throwing it through a big mess, right? You're rolling it through a big mess.
Yeah.
At the end, that little ball, right? You have four of them. All of them are going to look different, right? This one got very muddy. This one got very grassy. This one got covered in ketchup. They all look very different, but at their core, they're all the same ball. So as God was throwing our souls down into this world,
Right.
they all picked up different things and they all stopped at different stations. So at its core, it's all the same soul, but everything about the soul, its temperament, its power, what it's pulled towards, all of that is very different. And that is very much a distinction, which is why, right, we started off saying that we all have different goals in life. God wants us to be the best version of ourselves. You're not being compared to the Alter Rebbe, and I'm not being compared to the Alter Rebbe, because thank God, because we'd all fail that. What am I being compared to? To the very best version of myself. With my exact mix of ketchup and mud and grass that my soul happened to pick up, what's the best version that I can do with this package?
Do I do it outside of what gifts God gave me,
with the gifts that God gave me and the exact circumstances.
limited to and advancing with.
Exactly. With the soul that God gave me, and this is going to be a big theme. I'm glad you're picking up on this because it's going to be a big theme going through Tanya, how all of us have our mission.
Yeah.
And therefore, if my mission is every day to be tempted to rob a bank, I have to have that with joy because that's my mission. That's my.
So
that's my.
he's really. I mean, I am because of him.
Yes.
As myself,
Yes.
with choices that he has strengthened me with or weakened me with.
Beautifully said. Exactly so. And so my job now is to be the best version.
So we're best friends, even though I can't read Hebrew.
Absolutely.
And I'm still